Welcome back. Today I want to talk about a piece of music which we could probably describe as being the most successful ever written. And how do we define that kind of success? Well, in my previous music video on Billie Eilish, I was trying to quantify how you measure success. And that's not necessarily the same as greatness. Greatness is in the ears and the minds of the beholder, of course, and that's a topic for another day. So today's piece of music, I think we can see as successful because today is the 30th of November, 2024. And I can imagine that within a radius of 100 miles or 160 kilometers from where you are now watching this video, there is very likely to be a choir and an orchestra rehearsing this piece of music at this very moment. Because at this time of the year, it comes back again and again. Of course, I'm talking about Handel's Messiah. And it wasn't specifically written for Christmas at all, and we'll come into that later on. In fact, his first performance in 1742 was at Easter time. But first of all, as always, let's have a little bit of context. Let's look at who George Frederic Handel, as you would say in English, or Georg Friedrich Handel in German. A little bit about him and a little bit about his life, a little bit of context. And it's very interesting life. So even if you think you might not be into the music, you might find this little life story interesting. I've made a few notes here. Okay, so George Frederic Handel was born in 1685 in Halle, which is near Leipzig in Germany. It's quite far to the east. He's known as a harpsichordist and a violinist and an oboist. In fact, he likes the oboe very much, and you'll find the oboe coming back time and time again, blending beautifully with strings throughout his compositions. He started composing music around the age of 9, which you might think is incredible, but actually it wasn't that unusual because he started studying music from the age of 7. Now, his father was a barber or a surgeon in those days. Barbers used to not only cut hair, they used to perform operations. If some poor chap had his leg run over by a cart or something like that, then it would be the barber of the town, the surgeon, who would perform the operation. And I digress, but it was often successful in the sense that wherever they were, there was probably a surgeon or a barber nearby, and if you were lucky, you got a good one. I can imagine the whole process would have been very painful. But anyway, surgeons were well respected, but they weren't part of the aristocracy. And for Handel's father, the idea of Handel, his son, becoming a musician or even studying music was quite unthinkable, except for the fact that luckily a Kapellmeister, the person responsible for music in the chapel in the local church in Halle, recognized Handel's talent and actually suggested to his father that he should study. And study he did. From the age of 7, he would have been focusing on music and working with the Kapellmeister for, day in, day out. In fact, from around the age of 9, it's all a bit confusing because there isn't a lot of accurate information on Handel's life. He would have been writing a setting for the Mass every week. So that means writing a setting for the Mass, teaching it to the choir and having it performed every week for 3 to 4 years consistently, one week after another. And when I first heard about this, and with Bach doing the same, you think, wow, that's amazing. But actually, this is how he filled his week, studying and writing under the guidance of a much more experienced person. So that's what he did. So he matriculates from his university in his town, in Halle. And at the age of 17, which is not that unusual, it's around the same age that our young, brilliant classical musicians from the charity that I am running along with some other people. 16, 17, they often finish their university education at that age. And so he left and he went to join the Hamburg Orchestra. So we're now talking about 1703. He didn't stay there that long. He was obviously very ambitious from the beginning. And in 1706, he travels to Italy. Now, you have to imagine that in Firenze, in Florence, in Italy, there was a big push to make this kind of the music capital of the world, and all sorts of exciting things were happening there. And that's indeed where he turned up. And he was very interested in Italian opera, and that was all the rage, that was all the fashion. I see it a little bit like in the 60s and 70s, lots of bands moving to the region of Liverpool, or in America going across to California and moving to the sunshine in California, where all the hip things were happening in the 1960s. And you have this, in the Laurel Canyon is a place where Joni Mitchell and her friends were hanging out. Well, Handel was doing something very similar in the 18th century, and learning and listening and picking up lots of influences along the way. So 6 years later, 1710, he comes back to Hamburg and he gets a job working for George, the Elector of Hanover. And George is a prince. He's a nobleman, of course, and very important to work for. It's a good gig he's got there, but it doesn't last very long. In fact, we don't know, well, I don't know for sure, and maybe someone will correct me or point it out, whether he ran away from his employer or whether he asked for temporary permission. That's for me still not certain. But by the end of the year, he had gone and he had headed off to London. Now, you've got to imagine that London is basically 1,000 kilometres away from his hometown in Halle. So it would have been one hell of a journey, and he would have needed money to travel, for sure. And he got a great job in London, working for Queen Anne, the Queen of England. And she's paying him £200 a year salary, which is a hell of a lot of money. I need to make a calculation. Once I've done that, I'll pop it up in the subtitles. So anyway, that's what he does. And between 1710 and 1712, he returns home to Halle twice. Now, you can imagine it takes about, I'm guessing, about 4 weeks going in carriages and on barges or sailing boats down the Rhine. It would have been a hell of a journey. And again, you would need money for this, to do this. Apparently, he returns to the wedding of his sister, for example. And I find this fascinating, that people were travelling these great distances, well, wealthy people were, in that period. I always think of travel as being something just for us and in the recent age, since trains and aeroplanes, but that is definitely not the case. Anyway, so we're in 1714, he's back in England, and a very strange thing happens. The very person, George, the Elector of Hanover, who he ran away from or broke away his employment from, becomes King of England. Now, it could mean that Handel ends up in the Tower of London, but no, Handel gets away with it. And in fact, in 1717, he actually writes a piece of music for the royal fireworks called the Water Music. And that's one of the most famous pieces for which Handel is remembered to this day, of course. And so it looks like that George I of England has forgiven him. And by 1727, George II, George's son, becomes king. And by then, Handel is very well established. He's the big hit of the day. And in this period, he's also become English. He's registered as English. I don't know if they had dual nationalities in those days, but he composes a piece of music called Zadok the Priest. It's a fantastic piece of music. I strongly advise you to listen to that one. I'll put a link in the description below to one of my favourite recordings of it. Marvellous piece. And that piece of music has been played at the coronation of every monarch of England ever since. So that just shows you what an impressive piece of music it is. So Handel's Italian-style operas are becoming very fashionable around that time, but as time goes by, these fades and fancies are changing, and the Italian opera style is becoming less and less popular, and there's lots of competition coming from other areas. So much so, but by 1734, Handel, it seems to me anyway, the way I interpret the books, is falling on hard times. And he actually becomes ill. You could say he's having a breakdown. There's a lot of stress, there's financial worries now. He has a fancy house in London. It must cost a lot of money, the upkeep. And he's no longer the #1 hit in town. So what does he do? He thinks, okay, I'm going to focus on the English oratorio. And he writes incredible music around this period. I'm thinking of Soul, the oratorio Soul, and Israel in Egypt is another one. Saul, sorry, I should pronounce it correctly. Saul and Israel and Egypt, two amazing oratorios. He's experimenting with new kinds of orchestration with the concerti grossi pieces, and his organ concertos. And I'm going to come back to the organ concertos and the violin sonatos in future great recording series, because these are wonderful pieces which sound great on hi-fi systems and are lovely pieces of music to listen to. But in 1741, it seems that he gets invited to visit Dublin in Ireland. And he travels out there, and he's commissioned to write a piece for a charitable event that would take place in Easter. And it is this piece, Handel's Messiah, that he starts on in that period. Now, he writes it all from start to finish in 24 days, which is quite incredible when you think about it, but not unbelievable in the sense if he was writing a setting for the Mass every week, he would have got used to writing parts out quickly and efficiently. Now, I wrote a setting for the Mass when I was about 12, 13, and it took me quite a while, and it wasn't as grand. We didn't have a full orchestra, I can assure you. But it just shows you that, yeah, these things are possible when you're very professional, very focused. And his idea of 24 days were probably very long days, because the piece of music itself is about 2.5 hours long, depending how many repeats and whatever it would be. So he performs it in 1742 in April for the first time, and it was a hit. In fact, 700 people turned up to watch, which was a big crowd for those days. And it was so big that the ladies were asked to remove their whalebones from their dresses because they took up too much room. The fashion in that period was to have very wide dresses. And so they were asked to remove all the whalebones from them so that they could fit more people in the room. Now, in its standard arrangement, it takes about 2 to 2.5 hours, as I say, to perform. But apparently it was so successful that people were shouting and clapping, and they had to often repeat arias over and over again. So I think this probably went on for 3 to 4 hours. And the critics were pretty favourable. The sublime, the grand and the tender, adapted to the most elevated, majestic and moving words, conspired to transport and charm the ravished heart and ear, is apparently what a critic wrote. So that's pretty damn good. However, when he comes back to London, the London critics are not so favourable. And it's a bit of a problem because the Messiah was not written for the church. So it's based on, should we say, the story of Christianity or Christ. But none of the singers are taking a role. They're not acting Christ. They're not acting Judas. They're not acting any of the characters from which the texts are coming from. And so it was considered not religious enough for a church and too religious for a theatre. So he was sacrilegious, in fact. So he was sort of caught between a rock and a hard place. But by 1749, 7 years later, there was a sort of revival of this work. He'd tried a few times before in Covent Garden, and he had some pretty leading stars that helped people come, and it became sort of more successful. It was broadened out, it was made a bit bigger, because in the original version he simplifies it because he doesn't know how good the orchestra is going to be, how good the soloist singers are going to be. So now he's broadening it all out a bit with some extra parts added for a countertenor. And it was performed in 1750 at the Foundling Hospital and repeated more or less every year since then, as a charitable event and a fundraising event. And this is kind of why now it's played a lot at Christmas time. It was first performed, if my notes are correct, in 1853 in New York, with a chorus of 300 people, and then later in Boston with a chorus of 600 people. And in fact, in the Guinness Book of Records, it has the biggest choir ever with 3,000 people. And it's got this reputation because everybody knows that Hallelujah chorus, which we'll play in a minute, as a big chorus. But in fact, originally it was just for a very small group of people. And in fact, I think there would have been about 12 people in the chorus, and then your soloists, your soprano, your alto, and your tenor and bass taking up various parts. So I think this should cover everything. What else do I need to do? Well, I've got three main choices of performances that I really like, and I'm going to put them in the description. But I think, why don't we just start? And I'm going to start by showing you some different performances. Now, it's obvious that the one that you know is almost certainly not going to be mentioned by me, just purely by the law of averages. It's just unlikely that we can cover them all. But I want to start my first choice with the English Consort with Trevor Pinnock. It's recorded in 1988. And when I'm listening to all the different versions, and I've listened to a lot recently, I've come to the conclusion that, for me anyway, this one is really nice. It's centered, it's not too elaborate, would have been quite modern in its day, and that I will explain in a minute. So it opens with something called the symphony, which is just a piece of music. And what I'm going to do now is play you a few different versions of this symphony, and you'll very quickly get an idea of how different some of the performances can be. Let's start with the English Consort. So it's grand. It's the beginning of a long, long work. And if you've never seen it performed live, I strongly recommend that you do so, because it's fantastic, because it's a mammoth of a piece. And the conductor's got to stay focused, the choir have got to stay focused, the trumpet players have got to stay focused, because they don't play much. They only appear in, I think, 3 or 4 places. So it's a very understated, it's not bright and brash, and when the trumpets perform, it comes alive. And that's what makes it a great work, I think, too. It's very entertaining to listen to. So this is the nice, steady introduction. But let's listen to how this ensemble try it. this is spacious, it's open, it's wide. Sometimes there's almost no sense of rhythm. Let's just go back to the first one again. Right? And then this version. It's a lot slower. It's John Nelson conducting the English concert. The same ensemble as the previous one, but a different conductor. Much slower. Now, let's try the London Philharmonic. See what they do. This one's dramatic, isn't it? It's tragic already. It stated itself as being tragic. Now, my next choice is Otto Klemperer, and I'm sharing this one with you because Otto Klemperer has a reputation of taking everything slowly. Listen to his Beethoven recordings, symphony recordings, and they take much longer than most others. Let's see how he takes the opening of the Messiah. Well, if your conductor is opening at that pace and they keep that pace more or less throughout, you're in for a very, very long evening, aren't you? Now, a lot of people admire Leonard Bernstein, and I do. I think he's done a lot of great things in music. But he decided to interpret Handel in his own way, do things his own way. He even moves the place where the Hallelujah chorus comes in, because it doesn't come in at the end anyway, but he moves it up to the end of the first part. But listen how he handles the opening. Chords are so drawn out. You could almost imagine it being like Sibelius or something. Obviously, harmonically, it's not. But you can't imagine anything more different than the first version that we had. Let's just go through very quickly a couple of others. Here's Martin Perlman. Boston Baroque Orchestra. And I really like this version, and it's worth digging out. I'll put links to all of these in the description. But we're going to have just one more, and this is the Bach Consort from Vienna. And it's playing live, and they're in a church. So listen to how the conductor keeps all the phrases short and allows the echo in the church to extend them. It's a really clever use of recording technique and also interpretation. Have a listen. Now, we've heard a lot of different versions, so you can imagine just with that short musical introduction how different they are, that you have to start the pitch. You get an idea of how it might continue. But for the rest of it, I'm just going to really focus now on just one or two versions, because it's so long anyway, and I'm not going to compare each and every song. We would be here for a week. So after this orchestral piece, it opens with "Comfort Ye My People." Have a listen to how the English consort handle this. Now I can imagine that this music isn't for everyone, but I can assure you in its setting, in a live performance in a church or in a concert hall, it's absolutely beautiful to hear someone singing without a microphone and filling an entire space. And Handel provides us with so many beautiful, beautiful melodies. So you have a kind of aria, a song if you like, and then you'll have a recitative, which was the style, and in that recitative it would tell a little bit more of what's going on. But again, these were just texts that were picked out at the time at which Handel set to music. And then you would have a chorus where all the chorus would come, stand up and sing and join. Okay, let's now move on a little bit further into the work, still in the first part, and we're going to have "But Who May Abide the Day of His Coming." Listen to this. Listen to the lovely violin parts come here. this lovely echo and call. Handel does this so beautifully. It comes back in so much of his work. You kind of know where it's going to, but then sometimes he just takes you somewhere a little unexpected. Now, his parts are quite difficult to sing, to be honest with you, with all these little da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da and changing the pitch through. This was quite a demanding work to perform and to sing. I'm going to go further into the work now. For Unto Us a Child is Born. We're still in the same, with the same Trevor Pinnock version with the English Consort. Just to give you a flavour of the different contrasts that we might have in this piece. And you see, and also Handel's, even though it's so full, so beautiful, he's still holding back with that orchestra. He's not blasting the trumpets out. He has it's a simple arrangement, just some oboes, bassoons, strings, and with the accompaniment, the basso continuo harpsichord. Sometimes it's basses, and sometimes it's even violins, but it's used often with church organ. Sometimes when you hear a live recording, someone will be using the organ to fill in, often, especially if there was no orchestra. But if you ever get a chance to hear this live with orchestra, it's definitely worth doing so. Now, at a certain point, Handel gives us a little bit of a break. It's a very short, and he calls it, it says in brackets, pastoral symphony. It says it's a short break. It's a sort of little bit of change of light. Most of this is in the key of D and traveling around that key of D. So this theme comes back, and when the trumpets are playing, it's often in the key of D. And it's a nice key. I've always loved the key of D. I mean, as a guitarist, D was always a nice, bright sounding key to play in. And I think that's part of the magic too. Let's listen to the little bit of Pastoral Symphony. Trevor Pinnock gets a lovely warm sound from his orchestra, and the recording's good too. I'm going to the next piece. There were shepherds, and suddenly there. That little violin theme that we heard there accompanying her, you'll hear that back in Zadok the priest in the coronation anthem, and that comes back, and he's borrowing a lot here from things he'd done earlier, his best bits, if you like, put it together in this wonderful, wonderful work. Now we're going to go one more with, we're going to stay with the English Consort, and for Rejoice Greatly, O Daughter of Zion. Such a marvellous thing. Trevor Pinnock, yeah, he's got the wonderful Arlene Auger singing with him, and a great team of singers. So what we're going to leave them a little bit behind just for one moment, because I want to give you a flavour of a different version. And this is the Britain Sinfonia. It's an interesting version. It's not totally dissimilar to Trevor Pinnock's. It's recorded later and released later. I'll put all the details in the description below, of course. But let's listen to that same aria again, but sung by a different person, of course. Now, obviously, two singers will vary enormously. The colour of their voice, the timbre of their voice, also their breathing techniques, their ability to handle all those rapidly changing notes and keeping them all beautifully on pitch. There's no electronic cheating here. This is the real thing. And it's a very challenging thing to sing, and some people make it sound very simple, easy, of course, and others you think, wow, will they ever make it through? But the colour of the recording, the intimacy of the recording, the position of the voices, I don't suppose you're going to capture all of this with my simple little in-room microphones. But again, you know, with your own system at home, I'm sure you will enjoy it immensely. Now, I'm going to give you the same thing again, but we're going to go to the Dunedin Consort. Now, the Dunedin Consort is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful recording directed by John Butt. And what they're doing is they're going back to the Dublin version of 1742. It was released on Lynn Records back in 2006. And what they've done is they've kept everything more or less how they imagined it to be, and with the documentary evidence we have of how the original one would have been. So it's a slightly shortened version, a different version, or the original version. Again, very small chorus. You'll hear a lot more harpsichord acting as the basso continuo here. A completely different acoustic, a real feeling of, well, the Baroque, if you like. It's really much more of this early to mid 18th century style. And well, you can tell I like it enormously. Slightly different pitch to deal with here, but have a listen. Now, there's no doubt about it. The Dunedin Consort give this "Rejoice Greatly" is what it's called, this aria. And they give that feeling of joyous and playfulness and lightness and lifting. It's not all this whoa, heavy, operatic, hard, thick chocolate sound. It's light and it's joyous, which I think is how it should be. So that's the Dunedin Consort. Let's stay with them with the very famous aria that you may well know already. We like sheep. This says, so listen to this, because this demonstrates that very well as well.
Oh, we like sheep. Oh, we like sheep. I've gone astray. Oh, we like sheep. Oh, we like sheep. I've gone astray. We have done. We have done. Every time to this everyone is based on words. Oh, we like sheep. I've gone astray. I've gone astray.
Now we're getting a real feeling of intimacy here. So the Dunedin Consort really have this lightness and jollity about them, which I like very much. And it works even with the big stuff. So now I'm going to fast forward to the famous Hallelujah chorus. And we're going to hear it sung, I think it's 12 people in this recording. And listen to how wonderful it sounds, and listen also to the pronunciation of hallelujah or hallelujah. So have a little listen to this. For me, that's absolutely plenty. But let's now go back to the English concert with Trevor Pinnock and see how his bigger choir handles it. Bigger sound, isn't it? More how we imagine it in our heads. And then we'll go now to Stephen Layton's version with his, where are we? Here we go. Quicker, lighter orchestra. Say there, I think polyphony, the choral ensemble for this, the balance is very much to the sopranos and the altos, isn't it? The men are not really as forward. It's quite a thin sound. I find it a bit depressing. Let's just listen to a bit more of it. I think the balance is wrong. The depressing isn't the right word. Disappointing is the word I'm looking for. I found that a little bit disappointing. I was expecting so much from them because they're such a good ensemble and they've gone on to do great things. So I want to go back to the Dunedin Consort, and let's go to the famous trumpet shell sound. And finally, after the hallelujah, we've got trumpets as well. We've got some more trumpets here. Some great typical Handel. I just love this blend, this openness, this sort of sense of air in that space with the trumpets and the harpsichord and the strings and the wonderful singing too. I'm just going to go a little bit more just to, with the same Dunedin Consort, much further in, thou shalt break them with a rod of iron, which is how they end their version, which is quite different. You're 2 hours and a half into the concert. This is the ending.
Thou shalt break them. Thou shalt break them with a rod of iron. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Thou shalt dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Thou shalt break them.
Now it seems strange that that's how it would end, but this was the first performance, or the version of the first performance in 1742. And now we're going to go back to the Stephen Layton with the polyphony chorus, the one I was very rude about a minute ago. Oh, sorry about that. I just find that something's not quite right in the Hallelujah chorus. For the rest, it's fantastic. But let's just listen to their end. The last piece, of course, in the later version is the chorus Amen. Let's hear how they handle that. Whoa, isn't that lovely how they come together there? I'm just going to move our little recording on just a little bit further to take us towards the very ending of the piece. Marvellous. That's how Handel ends it in the later versions. If you have been, I hope you've enjoyed this. Handel's Messiah, probably the most successful piece of music ever written, in the sense it's played every year, every Christmas, all over the world by all sorts of people, all sorts of groups. It's a wonderful work. Enjoy it and enjoy the music. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.